And Miss Susan, if I could get I did the call to order, if I could get, yes, ma'am. But before we do the pledge, I'm gonna ask Commissioner Walker to lead us in prayer this morning. I'm sorry, Walt. I'm looking at Walker and saying.
Father, we say good morning. We certainly lift up Secretary, Father of the Department. Thank you for all of the ones that are serving this state. Interesting, you created the animals, Father, put us over. Father, we ask for wisdom and discernment today on decisions that will be made for the state of Louisiana. We lift up our governor, our president. Father, thank you for the soldiers that fought for our freedom today. Stand here today and just praise you, grace and your mercy that you give us. We ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Commissioner Walker. We all stand. Mr. Captain Madera?
Yes.
He's going to lead us in prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God.
Thank you. All right, Miss Susan, now can we get that roll call?
Brandon DeQueer,
Here.
Gene Reynolds is absent. Andrew Blanchard.
Here.
Andy Brister.
Here.
Kevin Segura.
Here.
Jonathan Walker.
Here.
Nathan Wall.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, there are 6 commissioners in attendance and we have a quorum. Secretary Sheehan is also present.
Thank you very much. All right, first item up is the approval of the September 5 agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the September 5 agenda? Motion by Commissioner Blanchard,
Second.
second by Commissioner Walker. All in favor? All right, hearing no opposition, motion carries. Next, we have the adoption of the August 1, 2024 commission meeting minutes. Meeting minutes have been previously distributed. Any commissioners have any comments on the meeting minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Moved by Mr. Segura, second by Mr. Blanchard. All in favor? All right, motion carries. Next, we have commission special announcements. Is Mr. Ronald Coco here? No. No. Is he here? Mr. Ronald Coco. Good morning, sir. If you don't mind, would you come up? We hear you have received a pretty impressive award. If you would, come on up and tell us about what just happened here.
Guess you told him what the last one I got? Yeah. I was selected for outstanding for the 4-H, helping 4-H with their programs through the year. I've been doing that with them for about 18 years now. And we do the fishing clinics.
Sure.
Yeah, and the shooting sports I do with them. And I do the hunting ed program with the 4-H kids.
So as I understand, you have been recognized as a Hall of Famer.
Hall of Fame, yeah, for the 4-H members. Yes,
That's very impressive. We certainly
yeah,
appreciate.
thank you for recognizing me. Yeah, I appreciate that. It was an honor to get, appointed to that, but there's 12 in the state that was appointed to it.
Very good.
So, but other than that, it's just try to get the kids out there to go out of the house. That's the hardest thing to do right now.
Keep them off of the digital devices
Yeah,
and
keep 'em
outside.
all, that's what if you read the article that came out in the paper, that's what it said. Keep them off the phone and off the internet and try to get them to go in the outdoors.
I certainly
Yes, sir.
appreciate your dedication to
All right.
4-H
I've
and
been involved with
commend
this.
you on your accomplishment.
Yeah, with the hunters that I've been involved for over 20 years now with them. So
Certainly.
All
Any
right,
other
thank you.
commissioners have any comments?
appreciate you.
Congratulations. All right. I believe we are now on item number 7. We are going to receive, I'm sorry. Thank you. The October 4th meeting for the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Commission will take place in Lake Providence at the Cotton Museum. The meeting tentatively will begin at 9:30. The department will put more information out on its website for the actual physical address and location, but it is the Cotton Museum in Lake Providence, and that will be on Friday, October the 4th. All right. Thank you, Ms. Susan. All right, the next item we have is receive an update on black bear hunting lottery process, and this is going to come from our esteemed and very wonderful secretary, Miss Madison Shaheen.
Well, good morning to the chairman and all the commissioners. Just want to thank you guys, obviously, for the work you do and all of the public that's here today. We just wanted to give you guys a quick update on where we sit with the bear program. We're obviously very proud of this program and where it currently sits. And you've gotten a lot of updates from John over the past few years, really, of where this process is sitting. And we're really kind of getting into that final stretch of actually being able to activate the lottery. And so what we're seeing right now is we've got about 500 people who have applied for the lottery so far. We'll get you guys those exact numbers and kind of allow you to track it with us. But, you know, for it being in that Bear Area 4 in such a small area, we're very proud of the fact that between Taylor's marketing efforts and all of you being able to talk about this on a regular basis, that we're really getting the word out. So making sure everybody is encouraged to apply and put themselves in the lottery. We have 10 tags available and really be able to see the success of this program be able to play out. And so the lottery opened on August 29th. It'll be open until September 25th. From there, we'll have a couple classes that the folks that get drawn for the bear tags will have to go through. And then after that, we will actually activate the season on December 7th through the 22nd. And so very excited about that. This is a huge effort, not only by yourself, but by the department, as well as all of our outside partners. So just wanted to take an opportunity to not only thank all of you, our bear program, but also of our landowners, our private partners, and everybody who's really put a lot of effort into making this happen. And so just wanted to thank all of you and look forward to the meeting today. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I definitely want to commend the department again. This is one of those instances where we have taken a species that was on the endangered list and brought it back to a sustainable level to now allow our sportsmen the opportunity to harvest a bear in Louisiana. Thank you again for your hard work. All right, item number 8, we have receive and consider amendments to the notice of intent. I'm sorry, item number 8, enforcement report. Captain Davis Madere, enforcement. Oh, my apologies, I'm just jumping all around this agenda.
Good morning, distinguished members of the commission and Mr. Chairman. Before I begin the enforcement report, I'd like to recognize Sergeant Rich Heinhold out of our Pineville office in Region 3. Sergeant Heinhold had over more than a year-long battle with cancer and passed away a couple of weeks ago. Rich was an asset to our department. He was a very staunch advocate of working migratory game birds and very good at it. Richard leaves behind a young child and a wife. And I'd just like to mention in the minutes, in memory and remembrance of Sergeant Richard Heinhold.
I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. Thank you.
Okay, last month, the month of August, total citations by enforcement were 1,014, 809 of which were criminal and civil violations, 328 of which were warning citations. We also had 48 public assists, be it on the water and on land. 3 cases of interest, I'll cover those today. First one, enforcement agents cited a Baker man in East Baton Rouge Parish for an alleged deer hunting violation on August 10th. Agents received information that a 10-point deer was taken from a Baker residence during the closed season. Through the investigation, agents determined that the subject had taken the deer with a rifle. Agents seized the deer and donated to a local charity. In addition to criminal fines and incarceration, the subject may face civil restitution totaling $2,033 for replacement value of the deer. In the next case, a Baton Rouge man was apprehended in Jefferson Parish near Grand Isle for allegedly fishing without a saltwater license, possessing undersized spotted sea trout, and possessing 50 or more spotted sea trout. During a compliance check, the subject was found to be in possession of 401 white trout and 65 spotted sea trout. All of the sea trout were under the 13-inch minimum size requirement. Agents seized the fish, which were donated to charity. In addition to criminal fines and incarceration, the subject could face just under $3,500 in civil restitution value for the fish. And our final case of interest, on August 4th in Vermilion Parish, agents cited 3 Texas men for several alleged oyster violations. While agents were on patrol in the Gulf of Mexico near Southwest Pass, they observed the subjects actively harvesting oysters from a private lease. It was ascertained during the investigation that none of the men had permission to harvest from the lease. All were cited for unlawfully taking oysters from a private lease, 29 sacks of oysters were seized in connection with the case and returned to the water. Unlawfully taking of oysters from the private lease carries a $900 to $950 fine and up to 120 days in jail. And I'll defer for any questions from the commission.
Any commissioner questions or comments for Captain Madera? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Now we move to item number 9. Receive and consider amendments to the notice of intent for rule changes to the reptile and amphibian regulations. And I believe we're going to have a presentation by Ms. Carrie Lejeune.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Carrie Lejeune. I'm the state herpetologist for the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and I'll be presenting the potpourri amendments for our original reptile and amphibian regulations notice of intent. I just wanted to provide you with an overview of our timeline. We first presented the original NOI in December 2023 at the commission meeting. That NOI was adopted and published in the January 20th, 2024 State Register. We then had an open public comment period up until March 5th, 2024. And the summary of public comments was presented at the March 2024 meeting. All of those public comments were provided to the commission. And then we also, at that meeting, March meeting, received a request to revisit the fiscal economic impact analysis. At that time, we took that time to gather, compile pertinent information. We met with stakeholders, we reviewed public comments, we had in-person meetings with the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, licensed turtle farmers. We also met with a U.S. ARC representative, United States of Amphibian and Reptile Keepers. And then we also had multiple communications with other entities and user groups. If this amended NOI and FEIS is adopted, will be published in the September 20th, 2024 State Register. After immediately following my presentation, Dr. Jack Isaacs will present the fiscal economic impact analysis. We will also have a public hearing on October 22nd, 2024 in this room. And we will also have an open public comment period that will be accepted until the public hearing. Okay, so now I'm just going to give you all of the potpourri amendments that included public input. Okay, under section B1, we changed the regulations, the language regarding AZA, animal well-being resources, and the American Society of Ichthyologists and Herpetologists guidelines to use those as examples because there are other resources out there pertaining to husbandry of pet reptiles. Okay, under housing and maintenance, we also did the same thing where we used the AZA manuals and the guidelines as an example, not to be the sole go-to for those resources. We also changed the statement for potable water, stating that it shall be accessible and meet requirements that are appropriate for the species. And under F1A, we changed the minimum enclosure sizes for snakes to make it more financially amenable to reptile keepers. So it now would state snakes 8 feet in length and longer. The perimeter of the enclosure shall not be less than the length of the snake and the height of the enclosure not less than 12 inches. Also for snakes less than 8 feet in length, the minimum enclosure size shall be relative to the length of the body and shall be 1/2 that length on the longest side. For turtles and tortoises, we, at the request of the licensed turtle farmers, we did add a statement stating that turtles possessed for commercial purposes for licensed turtle farmers are exempt from the enclosure sizes herein. And I just wanted to mention, although we are proposing to prohibit commercial turtle harvest, Louisiana licensed turtle farmers will be exempt from those limitations with a broodstock collection permit issued by our agency at no cost to the turtle farmer. They will continue to collect from the wild for breeding stock purposes. And under our turtle rules and regulations, we just updated the language here to make it a little more clear. We added that a WMA access permit would be needed for collection and possession of native turtles for recreational purposes on department-owned and managed lands. That also will require mandatory reporting. And then we also added that other facilities may be exempted from native turtle possession limits as permitted by the department. For our language related to the Endangered Species Act, we just listed here that it is unlawful to collect, possess, transport, and export any turtles designated as endangered or threatened under the ESA absent a valid permit. We also changed the time frame in which someone could register any restricted turtles they have over the limit to 180 days to allow folks more time to register those animals. We also updated the box turtle statement to specify that it refers to native turtles, box turtles in Louisiana. Okay, and here for the prohibited turtles list, we just updated the status to federally threatened for the Pearl River map turtle. That species was officially listed under the ESA last month. Okay, and for our native reptile and amphibian regulations, we just updated the language here again under the ESA statement, just to state that absent a valid permit, it shall be unlawful to collect, possess, transport, or export reptile or amphibians designated as threatened or endangered. Okay, and for the reference to the injurious wildlife under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Lacey Act, we just added that except for accredited and certified facilities as permitted by the department. No person shall import or transport into the state any of those species of reptiles or amphibians listed as injurious wildlife. And so here's our list of threatened and endangered species. Again, we just added the Pearl River map turtle since that is a newly listed federally threatened species. Okay, now we move to non-native amphibian reptiles and all venomous snakes. We updated the time frame in which folks in possession of the prohibited species would be able to register those animals to 365 days. Register those animals with the department and acquire a permit. This is the list of those proposed prohibited species. We added the brown tree snake at the request of public comment to the proposed prohibited list. We also updated the time frame to 365 days from 120 days for persons or businesses in possession of these prohibited non-native reptiles and amphibians to be able, for commercial sale, to be able to surrender their inventory to the department or sell their inventory. Animals surrendered to the department under this provision shall be handled via department policy. And again, we also state that after 365 days, prohibited non-native reptiles and amphibians may not be in possession for commercial use. Okay, and again here for restricted, we have a list of restricted non-native reptile and amphibian species that folks could be in possession of with a permit from the department. We would give them 365 days from the effective date of the rule to register those animals with us and acquire that permit. And this is that list. Again, brown tree snake is removed from the list because we had added it to the prohibited species list. Okay, and again, this is a reference to the injurious wildlife statement under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Lacey Act to state that except for accredited and certified facilities permitted by the department, no person shall import or transport into the state any species of reptile or amphibian listed as injurious wildlife. Okay, for our section on violations, we just updated this to be a little more clear and state that any live reptile or amphibian seized under provisions of this section that is illegal to possess shall be immediately forfeited and no property rights shall exist therein. The department may dispose of the seized animal in any manner the department deems appropriate. And finally, for our authority note, we just updated to include note 30 under 56.6 and then also 5660 reference here. Okay, thank you for your time. And with that, before I turn it over to Dr. Jack Isaacs to present the FEIS, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any commissioner questions? Mr. Blanchard?
Yeah,
Commissioner Blanchard?
Kerry, I just have one question. On the list of endangered reptiles on the turtles, you have the Pearl River turtle or whatever. I thought the Kemp Wrigley turtle and other sea turtles were on the endangered species list, and that's why our shrimpers are pulling tags is to protect these turtles. Can just clarify that for me? Just why it's not on the list today then?
The Kip's Ridley, it's on the list. Yes, sir. Under the threatened or endangered.
Yeah, so the only one that's not endangered is the Pearl River? I'm trying to get some clarification.
Right, yes, sir. So the Pearl River map turtle was officially listed as federally threatened by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service last month on the
Alright.
12th of August.
Right,
And so that species is now added to our list of threatened endangered species federally listed under the ESA.
okay, so all your sea turtles are
Yes, sir.
listed as endangered.
Yes, sir. All the sea turtles. We also have the gopher tortoise, the ring map turtle,
Right.
the Pearl River map turtle. Those two species only are found in the Pearl River drainage and nowhere else in the world. And so for the turtles, yep, that's our T&E species.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioner comments before we move to Dr. Isaac's presentation? Then we'll receive public comment after we see this. Thank you, Ms. Lejeune.
Well. Here we go. No, my presence here, my contribution is actually somewhat unusual. Ordinarily, when it comes to a rule of this sort, it just concludes the biological side. FEIS is ordinarily something included in commissioner's packet. But this time we thought I needed to get up here and talk because the last time we presented this, I think it was back in December, there were a lot of questions about the size of this industry and the number of participants in the industry and the sort that I thought I really needed to address. Actually, I was requested to address, and I'm glad to have this opportunity. Very good. So there are a lot of things going on in the original FEIS and in this potpourri. I'm going to focus on these right here, which we have, some sort of numbers give us some idea of the number of people involved and the size of the industry, but not really a whole lot. You see, this is an industry that has not been closely monitored or regulated. It's not like our commercial fisheries landings where, we have a good record of everything going on. But over the last couple of months, I think I've been able to get some information that will inform us, at least partially. So let's continue. Going to start with trip ticket turtle landings. Now, this right here addresses that part of the rule that Ms. Carey was just talking about, where the prohibition on the commercial landings of turtles, except for broodstock purposes. So here what we see is this is a really variable entity here. Okay, these are the current dockside value of commercial trip ticket landings of turtles landed in Louisiana for the past 22 years or so. Really low for the first 15 years, and in the last couple of years, there have been a couple of years, it looks like 2016, 2021, where values really went up, but for the most part, they're less than $50,000. This is just by species. You're trying to wonder what was going on there with those two big spikes that we saw. Somebody, it seems like, went out and started harvesting some musk turtles and got into a lot of them. So big spikes there for musk turtles. But for the most part, the average landings over the past 3 years or so have been about $130,000. And I think there have been an average about 17 commercial fishers who have reported trip ticket landings over the last 3 years on average. So let's carry on here. One thing that was I thought was kind of interesting of these folks who are out there harvesting turtles. These are going to harvesting turtles, selling them to seafood dealers, for the most part for sale into the meat market or consumption market. The average over the last 3 years has been about 17. And what we could see is that most of the folks who go out there and harvest turtles harvest turtles plus something else. Okay, so for example, in 2022, there were 19 folks who went out and landed turtles. 3 of those 19 landed only turtles. 16 of those 19 landed turtles plus something else. And in 2023, we had 16 who landed turtles and sold them through dealers. 7 landed, harvested only turtles, and 9 harvested turtles plus something else. And turtles make up a varying degree of the fishers' total landings. Okay, let's carry on here to turtle farms. Now, turtle farms are a very interesting segment. I really enjoyed going out and seeing how turtle farms operate. They have these big ponds. Turtles are in there living their little turtle lives. They come out and lay their eggs on the side. Folks go out and harvest the eggs. This is the way I saw it done, and bring the eggs in for incubation. And those eggs that hatch, those turtles that hatch, are later resold mainly to the pet industry. It's fascinating to think that all of this is going on out there. There were 19 licensed turtle farms who did this in 2024. Really, they have them all over the state. And remember here that this rule is going to allow them to continue to collect brood stock. So these folks come here and they put the turtles out here in ponds to live their lives and reproduce. And then, as time goes by, turtles will pass away, or their production level goes down. So they need to go out and replenish it every once in a while. And this gives you some idea too of what's going on, what these folks are producing. Now, the turtle farms are not required to report their production to us. Now, they're private businesses that they, for the most part, are going to deal with the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry, although they have to deal with us too, in a certain extent. But I like this to give you some idea. Now, this is the turtle exports through New Orleans. Now, this isn't going to tell us everything we want to know about Louisiana turtle farms, because Louisiana turtle farms can also export their turtles through Los Angeles. They can export them through Miami. But this through New Orleans is going to give us some idea of what our guys are producing. And we're going to see, for the most part, they're producing the red-eared sliders and the common musk turtles. Those two added together are the biggest a portion of their production. So it's kind of nice to know what they're producing. Now, the pet reptile and amphibian trade. A lot of folks out there are going to disagree with my numbers here, okay? But I'm going to carry on, okay? The U.S. Census Bureau did a survey of households across the United States. I think this was done 2 or 3 years ago. And what they found there is that 1.9% of U.S. households kept reptiles as pets. Now, if we assume that 1.9% number is still relevant, out of Louisiana's 1.8 million households, about 34,500 are going to have reptiles as pets somewhere in their house. And we also assume that there are 2.6 persons per household, what this is about 88,000 Louisianans live in a house with a reptile in it. Okay. Now, some folks think that this number is a lot larger. Some folks say it's like 300,000 households with turtles. They think that this might be a much larger industry than the numbers seem to indicate. But I'm going to stand by these numbers, because those larger numbers that I saw came from a report that was probably about 15 years old, and I really don't know how they did their work. Okay, so the Census Bureau came up with about 1.9% of the households having reptiles, and incidentally, the American Veterinary Association also did a survey. I think it was the AVMA who did this survey, and they came up with a number of about 1.5% of the U.S. households had a reptile in it. So I'm going to kind of go with those numbers. But most of those households will not be affected by this rule. Okay, so here are some information that I had to get from the popular press. Now, ordinarily, I'm kind of skeptical to use magazines and websites and things for information, but this is what I was able to find. And what we can see here are the most popular species, and the only ones that appear anywhere in our rule are going to be the ones highlighted there. Okay. The most popular things are like leopard geckos and corn snakes, ball pythons. All of those things are not necessarily affected by the rule. Okay. Red-eared sliders will be affected by the rule because we're limiting possession carry to 2. Is that right? For the red-eared sliders? And eastern box turtles, is that a native Louisiana turtle? Okay, so that would also be limited to 2. Okay, so a lot of snakes out there, a lot of the snakes, a lot of the turtles and things that folks enjoy, not affected. And also, for what it's worth, we did a little bit of unscientific research. I went out to a pet shops, like PetSmart, Petco, and things, all the way up and down South Louisiana, from over in the Florida parishes all the way over to here. And I came across red-eared sliders. I didn't see anything else that appears on our restricted list or the prohibited list. That's not necessarily hard research, but it backs things up. So here again are our restricted species. We get the boa constrictors, reticulated pythons, and the like that you can read. Now, what I wanted to do to get a handle on the relative popularity of these animals was to go to websites where folks actually sell these things. And I could go through and I could see how many of these things are being sold and kind of keep a notion on that, okay? Now, what we have here are kind of the numbers of specimens of animals being sold on one particular date. I believe this was in May of this year. I was preparing this presentation. I went through and said, okay, how many folks are selling boa constrictors? How many folks are selling reticulated pythons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now let's stop for a moment and think about the limitations of what I've done here. Okay, this is just one website. Okay, now for what it's worth, on previous days, I went through and looked at several different websites. I looked at the Morph Market, Backwater Reptiles, Underground Reptiles, Upriver Reptiles, Reptile Rapture, and collected that information for kind of a preliminary standpoint. This just shows kind of what appear to be the most popular of the restricted species, according to what we could gather from this particular website. And this all comes from Morph Market. What we can see here is fairly consistent with what I kind of expected based on the previous slide that I showed you. Boa constrictors, a whole lot of boa constrictors. This is incidentally nationally speaking. On this particular day, we had about 3,800 of those that were being sold, about 1,000 reticulated pythons. So that's also a creature that I think we're going to encounter in good numbers here in Louisiana. But some of those other creatures that appeared on the restricted species, the Asian water monitors, the anaconda, the brown basilisks, relatively uncommon. Okay, so of the restricted species, I think we're going to have a lot of folks who are going to apply for permits who have boa constrictors and reticulated pythons, and smaller number for these other species that are out there. Now, remember, the restricted reptiles means that you can still have them. All you need to do is get a permit from the state telling us that you have them, right? And that's free. Now, there is going to be a cost associated with that, I guess, your time and having to fill out the paperwork. And I know none of us really love government paperwork. So I got to give us some idea of what we're going to expect from these species, okay? Probably a lot of boa constrictors and the like. Now, I wish I had been able to go through and come up with a good estimate of the number of boa constrictors that are 8 feet and longer and the like, but that just wasn't something that I could do. Let's look at the average value of these specimens. Now, again, okay, the average here is not necessarily going to tell us a whole lot because there's incredible variation in the value of some of these creatures. okay, depending on the length of the snake and color pattern of the snake and whatnot. It's just an incredible variation. You can have values that are several times larger than the average and some that are several times smaller than the average. But generally speaking, on this particular day, it looks like boa constrictors were going for about $1,000 each, reticulated pythons for about $1,200. The Asian water monitors, which are not terribly common, again, according to the methodology that I followed here, about $2,000 each. And then boa constrictors about $1,100 each. So these creatures can have a pretty good resale value, okay? And these are the prohibited species. Okay, so these are the ones that, let's see, if you're a private individual, you have to have a permit to have them, right? For the restricted species, the prohibited species, but you're not going to be allowed to bring any more in, right? If you're a commercial vendor, you have to get rid of your prohibited stock, right? You can't reproduce, and you can't sell them anymore about a year after this rule would pass. Okay, so all these creatures here, the tegus and the Nile monitors and the like. Let's have a look here at kind of what's going on here. Okay, we're going to go into the cost for the firms that are, well, we're going to go into some of the activity related to the people who own these things and the people who are selling these things. Let's pause for a moment and think of what we're trying to do here. Why are we going to propose this rule? What are the potential benefits of passing this rule before we go into some of the costs? So the idea here of the prohibited species is that you're trying to reduce the risk of the introduction of invasive species. As an economist, I would say that the benefit of this would be in the aversion cost. That is the cost that you do not have to pay because you prevented the introduction of an invasive species. And we could look at the invasive species and see several examples of things that just went haywire after creatures came into the state and escaped, or came into the United States and escaped. So, for example, the Burmese pythons down in South Florida, right? Complete fiasco from my standpoint. Okay. Now, the Burmese pythons probably won't be able to survive in Louisiana under current conditions, but we're trying to prevent an establishment of those things because it's a mess down in South Florida. Iguanas in South Florida. You know, I grew up down there. You never really saw any iguanas. Now you go out to parks and things, and they're all over the place, and they're crowding out native species and just creating a headache. Let's also think about lionfish, snakehead, apple snails, nutria, starlings, and brown-headed cowbirds. You know, those are invasive species. Okay, and also this is interesting. In Colombia, hippopotami are an invasive species. I'm not making this up. Pablo Escobar, the drug kingpin down in Colombia, brought in hippopotami for his zoo. And after he was gunned down, he came to a very violent end. Nobody took care of his zoo anymore. And so now there are hippopotami wandering around in Colombia. And they've started reproducing and whatnot, and it's just a mess. So we want to prevent that sort of thing from happening. Let's hope we're successful because we already have enough problems as is. Some of the factors contributing to this is the probability of a creature's becoming established. We have some speculation for what that is based upon what other states have encountered. What species have become invasive in other southern states? That's one of the ways we go through and try to assess that. But we don't have all the information we would like, right? Potential damage of an established stock, you know, what damage is it going to do? These pythons I mentioned are down there eating alligators and basically anything that moves, probably a lot of damage there. Then also the potential cost of control and management of the species, you know, once it has become established. A lot of unknowns about this when it comes to the creatures here on this prohibited list. One thing we can say is that the state of Georgia is spending something like $50,000 a year controlling tegu, and tegu is one of the species on the prohibited list for that, you know, That's one of those three. So anyway, carrying on, what we can see is the same methodology that I used for the restricted species, trying to see how many creatures were offered on one particular website on one particular date. And what I would surmise from this is that of the proposed prohibited species, the Burmese python is what I would expect to be the most plentiful, the one that we might have the most here in the state. But there are also other examples of these things. 42 tegu. Now these numbers are national and not state level. I do have some state level numbers coming up. All right, and the value of these things. The Burmese python is going for about $900 each. Tegu is going for $600 each, kind of those iguana-like lizard type things. The green iguana thing here, I think this is probably overvalued. These are iguana being sold as pets, when what we've heard anecdotally is that there are folks who are selling iguanas as food. Okay, apparently they're pretty good. Okay, I don't think anybody is going to spend $300 for an iguana and then eat it. Okay, so that's probably a little overvalued for that. That's probably a special species. All right, now this is Burmese python. Pardon me? Okay, I catch it. Reticulated python. Okay, this is a reticulated python. Now I'm going to shift over into some state information. So I went and narrowed my search for vendors who are selling snakes and lizards and things to just the state of Louisiana. What I came across there, and this is just for one day, okay, is that 62 vendors were offering snakes, lizards, other reptiles on this website. Now, some of them didn't have anything to sell the day that I checked, but they were still there on the website. And they had 451 offerings. Now, remember earlier I mentioned that the most popular snakes out there are probably the ball pythons. Okay, this would actually kind of give you some evidence to back that up. 26 of those 62 vendors sold ball pythons, and they had about 162 observations. 162 snakes were being sold on that date. Average value for the ball pythons about $600 each. Incredible variation there in the value of ball pythons. But the thing is, ball pythons not affected by this rule. Okay, boa constrictors. We had 6 vendors who were selling boa constrictors. We had selling 11 on that particular date. Reticulated pythons, we had 1 who was selling 6. So you kind of get the notion here that we do have vendors who are out there selling some of the creatures that are on the restricted list, and maybe even some that are going to be there on the prohibited list too, although we can't necessarily say whether those iguanas or the green iguanas or the monitors here are species of monitors that we're going to, that this rule would prohibit. Okay, other information about venomous snakes and other restricted snakes. The state of Louisiana issued 6 permits for Burmese pythons in the state. Okay, right now you need a permit under the proposed rule. You might still be allowed to keep them if you're a private individual, but not if you're selling them for resale. For venomous snakes, we had 44 folks who had those. Okay, 32 venomous, 15 highly venomous. Oh, incidentally, if you add these 2 numbers together, you come up with more than 47, because some folks held permits, I guess, for more than one of these species. Okay, so there's kind of some overlap between the 2. All right, now here comes the a major matter of concern from the folks that I spoke to. I called a lot of folks on the phone, went out and spoke to some folks at Snake Farm. Fascinating experience. Okay, and as you saw earlier in the rule, turtles would have to have a certain minimum enclosure size. Lizards the same. Snakes broken into 2 sections: snakes under 8 feet long, and then snakes over 8 feet long have a different set of rules. And this is one of those situations where you have to kind of balance animal welfare. I said animal welfare, not animal rights. It bans animal welfare against this just the profitability of an industry. And it's hard sometimes to get that type of balance right. And that is something that you gentlemen up there on the dais are going to have to try to figure out. Okay, this thing could be expensive, to be quite frank. Okay, but this is very similar, I think, to things that have been encountered in other industries that involved in animal production. The poultry industry, the cattle industry, other industries have had a very similar experience trying to balance those economic concerns against the humanitarian concerns of balance of treating the animals well. Incidentally, most of the folks who keep reptiles and raise the reptiles are very empathetic towards the animal. There's actually some research over in Britain that suggests that folks who keep reptiles as pets actually have a stronger affection for their animals than a lot of folks who have dogs and cats. The folks just become very attached to these animals. And I could understand because they're fascinating, intriguing creatures. But let's carry on here with the commercial and other personal costs. So these things actually could be relatively expensive, these cages. You can see some of the various cage sizes here and the various expenditures for various costs for them. Okay, now the upper end of the values that you see here, like for that 36-inch enclosure, the $450 cost, the $500 cost for the 48-inch long enclosure. Those came from Mr. Philip Goss of US Ark, okay, who's very helpful. He works with a lot of producers out there and reptile keepers, and he gave me some pretty good information. But I did notice that the types of enclosures to which he directed me as kind of examples for how much these things could cost tended to be a little bit more on the elaborate size. Okay, when I went to the snake farm, for example, I saw some relatively simple containers that the gentleman was using to take care of his animals, and they were not as elaborate as the ones that Mr. Goss directed me to. But for all I know, maybe those more elaborate ones, those fancier ones, are better for certain species, for certain types of snakes than the ball pythons that I saw at the one snake farm that I went to. So there's a lot of variation here in the cost. Now, what we don't know here would be the number of farms that are already in compliance, right? So we have a new standard for cage sizes. We don't know how many folks already have cage sizes that are that large. Now, I would say that the department here made a good faith effort to go out and talk to folks in the industry and to adopt a minimum enclosure size that was similar to the ones that folks already have, something that would be acceptable to folks who are involved in producing these animals. But I can't necessarily say if what we've proposed is actually going to do what we hoped it would do. It might be fairly expensive for some of the snake farmers out there to comply with this rule. Okay, if they're not in compliance already. Okay, so this is just a costly rule for some folks who have maybe cages on the smaller size. But remember, we did try to meet folks halfway and come up with minimum cage sizes that were similar to the equipment that's already on hand. It's not necessarily going to be the same for everybody, right? Just a little observation that I like to come up with. You may remember I said that there were 62 folks who were selling reptiles in Louisiana through this one website. 40% of the snakes that were being sold on that website, sold by 4 businesses. Okay, so what that suggests to me is that there are some businesses that may have just a small number of reptiles, and it's probably going to be relatively inexpensive for them to comply with these rules. And then there are some that have lots and lots of reptiles, and these $500, $400 values could probably add up pretty quickly if their sizes are not big enough as it is. Other things too that my analysis isn't able to take into account would be just the space requirements for this. Okay, if you're talking about somebody who has 50 snakes out there and he has to get 50 bigger cages, where is he going to put all of them? That's another complication for adopting this rule. Now, one other thing that I want to handle would be the prohibition on public events that wantonly waste reptiles. Now, to my knowledge, there is one of them at this point of time. And this is up in Lake Providence. Okay. And that one in Lake Providence had about 32 to 40 participants the last time it was held, about 16 to 20 vessels. And the crowd was about 40 to 50 people. Now, in years past, it was a lot larger than this, but there have been a public outcry, and the animal welfare groups or animal rights groups have put a lot of pressure on the local folks here. And so there have been no events scheduled for 2024 or 2025. And who knows what's going to happen in the future. One thing I would like to point out, okay, is that such events could probably still go on in future if the nature of the event was modified in such a way to eliminate the wanton waste, right? If folks were somehow to change the rules and make sure that the animals that were harvested were not wasted. I'm not an attorney here, so please don't quote me on this. The event might not actually be canceled. It might be able to go on as it had in the past. But that's all I have to say. And so I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank
Looks
you,
like I have-
Dr. Isaacs.
Oh, yes.
Any commissioner comments or questions for Dr. Isaacs? Well, what I'm gonna do is I'll move to public comment, and then we can
Excellent.
circle back to the commissioners if there are any additional comments following public.
Very good. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you on the presentation. First up, we have Brad Glorioso.
How are you doing?
Morning.
So my name's Brad. Most people know me by Bones, my nickname. I grew up in St. Bernard Parish, in the parish, catching critters. I have a real strong passion for amphibians and reptiles, always have. But my focus is on wild amphibians and reptiles. I care about our wild population, so I'm not going to speak to some of the captive issues within this NOI. But I will say I know turtles, and I know wild turtles pretty well. And they have a really hard time on their own. Okay. There are studies out there, very, very, very few of the eggs ever laid by females hatch. And very few of those hatchlings make it to the water. Very few of those that make it to the water will make it to reproductive maturity to replace their parents and such. So most turtle populations rely on the annual output and reproduction of nearly all of the mature females in their populations to survive. Why is this? Well, lots of things have changed over the few hundred years we've been around in this landscape. Habitat degradation, habitat loss. A lot of these things have subsidized the mesopredators like raccoons and those kinds of things. They're native species, right? But they love turtle eggs. And we have a lot more edge around because of, degradation of habitats. We have fire ants also destroy a lot of turtle nests. The point is, very few of these turtle populations are actually stable or increasing. And we don't have data on all turtle populations of all species, but what we do know is basic turtle biology and natural history, that turtles are long-lived. All right, a lot of them take many years to become mature. Some of them will take 10, 15 years to become mature. Many of our turtle species will live 30, 40 years. Some of them live 80 to 100 plus years. Turtle populations worldwide cannot withstand commercial harvests. That's just it. Now we are very lucky in the southeastern United States to have quite a diverse turtle fauna. And because of that, we have a history of turtle harvest. And a lot of those turtles a long time ago, besides pet trade animals, a lot of them were shipped off to Asia. Now, why is that? Well, if you look up Asian turtle crisis on the web, you'll find that in Asia, there's an insatiable appetite for turtles, and they destroyed the populations of all their native turtles to the point of extinction for many of them. And some of them only exist in captive populations now. And so they wanted turtles, and the southeastern US provided those turtles to them. So what has happened is a lot of our fellow southeastern states like Texas, Mississippi, Alabama have banned commercial harvest of their turtle species. And we don't have to be like Mississippi or Alabama or Texas per se. But what I will say is when those states ban those activities, where do you think they come? The people that do that kind of activity, they're going to come to where it's still legal. And so that puts more pressure on our turtle populations. And like the previous speaker said, I really love these animals. I love them as much as, you know, you might love your dog or cat or whatever, you know, pets you have. And I want to see my kids and my grandkids one day enjoy wild turtle populations in Louisiana. And I think it's our duty to protect our wild populations. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next we have Keith Boudreau. Good morning.
Keith Boudreau, here today to represent Tangi Turtle Farm. I spoke to y'all last March, and I will try to keep my comments under the 3-minute period this time. Tangi Turtle Farm opposes the new regulations. Although we have had a seminar that we agreed to do amendment for the turtle enclosures. Our biggest stickling point now for myself as a turtle farmer and also my colleagues is that we have no format for the catching or repopulation of our turtle farms. We don't know what species is going to be allowed. We don't know the amount. We don't know by whom is going to write these regulations or the time frame it's going to take to get these regulations, these approvals. Now, in the past, we have lived by the good old boy regulation rule. Shake your hand, look you in the eye, slap you on the back and say, don't worry, we'll take care of it for you. Well, when they say that, then we have to worry. So we would like to, again, have a seminar, a workshop to agree to what needs to take place and how we're going to get these regulations in place in writing so that we know and everybody else does on how we're going to move forward and protect our turtle farming industry. As far as the commercial take of turtles, we have a pet turtle market. We have a research turtle market that I've given many turtles to Dr. Lutz at LSU to do research on over there. And we all have a food turtle market. Now, just recently, I was flipping channels and Leah Chase was cooking turtle. Turtle is a delicacy. Turtle is a ethnic food around Easter time. A lot of the people around the New Orleans, South Louisiana area. And if we close the commercial fishing of these turtles, food turtles, then there's going to be no more turtle sauce become. The only complaint that I have is that the meeting, which we are at today, was only scheduled here last Friday. We did not know about it until last Friday. Long weekend, a lot of people out of Louisiana, LSU game, so forth and so on. We only had 2 working days to prepare for this meeting. There was 3 other turtle farmers which would like to be here and like to make comment. Unfortunately, they had other obligations, vacations, work schedule, so forth and so on. And that we only received the amendment, whereas we accepted the enclosure at 4:10 yesterday afternoon, so we did not know anything about it. I would suggest that we get together as far as the industry and also government to work on the restocking or the stocking of these farms. I think this is something that can really be worked out. It'd be good for both of us to put some numbers down so that we're very willing to do so. And please remember that whatever precedent y'all take as far as this issue concerned, to be a precedent that would be long lasting in other industries such as the crawfish and the alligator and the fishing industry. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you very much. How did I do with time that time?
Did better, did much better.
All right,
Thank you. Lastly, we have Mr. Phil Goss. All right. I'm assuming those are S's.
And I appreciate that. I'm often introduced as Mr. Gross at these hearings. The R gets added in there, which is not appreciated, but I am a person who keeps snakes as pets, so a lot of people may think I'm gross, but Mr. Goss, yes. So thank you, commissioners, for having us here today, introducing these amendments. I am Phil Goss, president of the United States Association of Reptile Keepers, otherwise known as USARC. And I always make it a point that we represent responsible reptile keepers and businesses. So to the commissioners and to any law enforcement in the room, obviously, if someone's doing something bad, releasing animals, not keeping them properly, I would hope they get caught because that's a black eye for us. But again, I'm here representing the responsible people today. And I go to these hearings a lot. I've been doing this for about 12 years, and I often hear we don't want to be like Florida. And I don't blame you for not wanting to be like Florida, but you usually don't hear the whole side of what happened in Florida. So going back almost 20 years ago, the reptile industry actually asked the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission to regulate tegus. They ended up banning them finally about 3 years ago, but 17 years before that, industry was trying to be proactive and said, this species is probably going to be a concern. Let's regulate them. And for some reason, the commission just never listened to us. So industry, again, tried to be proactive, and we'll do that in any state. We're happy to work with departments and wildlife agencies. And same with green iguanas. 3 years ago, Fish and Wildlife Commission banned green iguanas. We said, you're going a little bit too far with this. If you talk to anyone down in Southern Florida, in the last 3 years, the green iguana population has boomed because the regulations went too far, and Fish and Wildlife Commission, we feel, did not work with industry and trappers like they should have. And now they're actually looking to change the rules again. But we tried to be proactive. So again, just reiterating, we're always happy to work with agencies and departments to be proactive on these things. And to the commission, I ask that you treat responsible reptile keepers just like you do hunters and fishers. The ones that are responsible to get to go out and enjoy it. Same with responsible reptile keepers. You punish the bad ones, you let the good ones continue to do what they do. And it was touched on by the first speaker. The Asian turtle market is a huge problem. And we're seeing a trend to just ban any activity in native species. But we need to start looking at, when you do that, the prices in Asia go up 10, 20, possibly 50-fold. So if you have a native box turtle or diamondback terrapin, whatever it is, that may have been selling over there for $100 or $200, the illegal smugglers actually watch what we list and when we in commercial trade. So that turtle that was $100 or $200 may now be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and it actually incentivizes them. So there's got to be some talk at least. I'm not saying that they may still not get banned, but again, industry wants to make people aware of this. Banning doesn't always work. It didn't work for elephants. It didn't work for white rhinos. There's a lot of species where if there's an incentive to kill those animals and make money off of it, they're going to do it at whatever cost there is. And I'm already at my 3 minutes, but again, we're just offering to help. And there is one speaker, wanted me to mention him, Stephen Kennedy, actually just does reptile rescue here in Louisiana. And the department actually has sent him animals before. He wants to make sure that he'll be able to continue to do that. And he continues to offer his services. And thank you for your time. Yeah, any questions? I'm standing here.
The Asian deal, why are they eating them? Are they pets? They just love?
Mainly it's eating, but once they get to that, I mean, I've never been there. I don't know what they're doing when they spend $4,000 or $5,000 on turtle. It may be that they're, they may turn that one turtle into 100 bowls of turtle soup and charge $500 a bowl of soup. So some of them may be being eaten. Some of them may just be prize pets because again, when they get endangered, you get those people that just want to have it because it's endangered in it. And I agree. I mean, we don't want them to be eliminated from the wild and go extinct, but if you just go a blunt ban, sometimes that may not always be the best approach.
Yeah, why haven't the Asian market tried to develop more turtle farms?
They are with some species. There's a lot
They
of
are
species,
starting
even
to-
even giant salamanders, which you may have heard of hellbenders here in the US, which
Right.
is our biggest. Giant salamanders are 3-4 feet long, just huge. So they're actually breeding those and eating those. Again, this is I don't know what else is going on over there, but they are eating them. They use them in traditional medicine too. So some species they are breeding on huge scales. But again, if that species is not bred on a large scale and it goes endangered over here, it unfortunately incentivizes even more poaching if we don't handle it properly.
And why we don't have more turtle farms in our own country trying to bring the population?
Well,
back?
overregulation keeps cutting down the number of people who want to do it every year. So there's something called CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which is an international agreement. And species get listed as they have 3 appendices there. And when they get elevated on those appendix, then people in the US can't get export permits for them. So it's all kinds of issues with turtle farming. And sometimes you just get regulated out of business.
Okay, I guess that's what's going on with like the Kemp Wrigley turtle, right there, because it's being raised up in beaches up on Mexico, and now we starting to see some of them starting to lay on beaches in the States here, but we still got a tremendous shortage of Kemp Wrigley, throughout the whole world, from what I understand.
Yeah, all the sea turtles are having issues. A lot of, there's a lot of reasons for that, but yeah, especially plastics in the ocean. But, the first speaker hit on it with turtles, and most of them never live to maturity and even get to breeding age. I mean, it's hard for turtles. I want to say the last statistic I read, it's literally like 1 in every 10 million sea turtles actually gets to hatch and reproduce. I mean, it's a tremendously high number.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for your time, commissioners.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the comments that I've received on item number 9. Any further commissioner comments, or observations?
I have a question for Mr. June. On the concern that they brought up about the turtle farm and being able to restock. Are we have y'all been doing any work on figuring out how we get that done? Because I mean, we don't want to kill an entity. We want them to be able to have some clear path forward on how they're going to be able to restock their farm. And if it's that bad in the wild, is there any returns that they, kind of like the alligator farm does, you put returns, do they do any return on eggs that are collected in the wild?
Right, yeah, so that's what we were trying to do, and to keep them going, keep them in business. We understand the value, the cultural side of things too. A lot of them want to pass the farm down to their children. And so by allowing take from the wild for breeding stock via a permit from us, we're allowing them to continue their operations successfully, but also for us to be able to collect data from what's being taken from the wild. So for the history of turtle farming in Louisiana, we've never had any reporting from anything that's been taken in the wild. We have no data. So what we're trying to do is get to a point where, yes, we would prohibit commercial turtle harvest to outside entities, any new turtle farm. I've had calls from people from Florida and outside states wanting to move to Louisiana to start a turtle farming business because of the laws are more lax here. We would not, subsequent to the effective date of the rule, we wouldn't allow new turtle farms from outside the state to come in and be able to collect from the wild, because we want to reserve that for our current existing turtle farms. We have talked about it, the process for permitting. We want to make it as streamlined and plan to do that as streamlined and easy as possible for them to be able to get a permit in a timely manner, be able to get what species they want. We also want to be able to collect location data. So any data we do have from the little trip ticket information we have from the dealer's licenses, we might have some turtle information that Dr. Isaacs presented. However, there's no location data with that. So even if we see that 10,000 turtles have been collected in the state, we have no idea where that's at. So, and what implications that has for those populations within that watershed. So with this permit, we'd be able to allow them to collect brood stock, but also we would be able to collect that information, start collecting the data on what's taken from the wild, and then also location data associated with that. So, but we do intend to make that as streamlined as possible to help them to be able to collect what they need in a timely manner.
Okay, so anything collected is just brood stock. They don't find any eggs and incubate on a farm. Your incubation is all done with the stock you have on your farm, correct? Okay, it's fine. So so where are we at on sitting down with them and getting them numbers so they do know what I just want to make sure that whatever you get accomplished today and vote on, we need to know, we need to let these farms know, hey, we're ready to sit down, or you guys are ready to sit down right now and figure it out and come up with the numbers, because they have I think they need to know that going forward, what their limitations are going to be and how they're going to be able to restock their farm. Because it is cultural and it is a business that's going to be passed down to family, and it's important to the state that we let them know what's going on. My thoughts.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And we did have an in-person meeting with them here at the Baton Rouge office in May, where we invited all of the turtle farmers and we sat down, met with them, discussed what our plan was moving forward. The majority of the turtle farmers that attended that meeting seemed very pleased with what we were doing and understood that we were trying to help them out, keep their businesses going, but also making sure that our native turtle populations continue to be stable, or we can increase them, the ones that are declining. We just don't have any information. But by kind of narrowing it down to the Louisiana turtle farmers, we wouldn't be allowing outside folks to take turtles commercially. Turtle farmers would be exempt, so they would be allowed to collect. We don't envision, like right now, to say that we have a limit of, oh, you can take this many from this waterway or that waterway. It's all going to depend on what they're requesting at the time. They may come to us and say, I need 1,000 turtles of this species or that species. We would write them a permit, work with them. If there's a particular waterway that we know we have data for that is not satisfactory for that particular species in that waterway, then we could work with them on location information or location sites to trap. We're allowing them 3 trappers per permit. So they can select 3 trappers that they work with to go and collect for them. And those would be listed on the permit as well. Those trappers would need to have a collector's license. There's never been reporting with our collector's license for the history of our agency. So this would allow us also to collect data on what those collectors are getting from the wild as far as our native turtles. But we would work with them on a case-by-case basis for what they need to replenish their stock. We understand that hurricanes happen and fences come down and they lose turtles and that sort of thing. So it would just be a case-by-case basis on what they're needing at the time to continue to go forward. But our intent is to help them get what they need to continue those operations and make sure that they can be successful.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that and I know you've met and all that stuff, but I want to make sure going forward, if it's 3 months from now, 2 months from now, we're sitting with them and saying, okay, we feel they can come and say, hey, we feel we have these needs. The state feels that they can offer this many. We just need to make sure we're working forward on those numbers. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
That was on a volunteer basis? I was just curious.
Any other commissioners?
Yeah, I got one. On this potpourri that we fixing the vote on, the stakeholders, are they in favor of this potpourri? Or we know that?
Well, I presented the summary of public comment at the March meeting.
Okay.
And so it just depends. I mean, we had opposition, we had in favor. I don't have those exact numbers in front of me right now of what I presented in March. But it just depended on the entity. We did have a lot of folks in favor of prohibiting commercial turtle harvest. There was a majority were in favor for that. Of course, as you heard today, there were some issues with the snake enclosure sizes. We got a lot of pushback on that because folks were afraid that they were going to have to spend an enormous amount of money to go, and you saw how much those cage enclosures could cost. And if you have 100, 200 snakes and you have to go buy enclosures for all of those, or if you're breeding snakes and you have a bunch of hatchlings that you have to go buy these large enclosures for, that could get really costly, and folks were worried about having to go out of business. So that's why we worked with them to try to come up with some minimum size enclosure requirements that they either already have and they won't have to go get any additional enclosures, or it wouldn't be that much costly to them to go and update their enclosure sizes. And that we worked with US ARC on that to come up with those size requirements to make it more amenable financially to reptile keepers.
The reason I asked, we've had several emails, I guess, all the commissioners to kind of push this back, a little bit so that the public would have more time to analyze it. And, back in May till now, that's, 5 months ago, right there. So I was just curious to get some up-to-date figures, from
Right.
the stakeholders.
And we did evaluate the public comments and what folks submitted for that regarding the enclosure requirements and other comments that they had regarding the prohibited species. We evaluated all that, and in meeting with US ARC and in talking with other entities and organizations, this is what we are presenting as our proposed amendments to the original NOI.
So I got a question. What type of turtle are people consuming versus what type they use as pets? They want as pets. What's the difference? Are they the same thing? I just
So
see
if you're-
turtles out my back door
Right.
when I go outside in the spring. That's all I know about a turtle.
Right. Yeah. So here in Louisiana, a lot of, folks are collecting turtles to sell overseas, as you've heard, for the pet trade, also for food. I don't know the exact proportion. Like I said, we got more comments that were in favor of prohibiting commercial turtle harvest than in opposition. But also, so in Asia, just to kind of reiterate that, they believe turtles bring prosperity, longevity, and all that. So it is really big in the pet trade over there. They've gotten a lot of our turtles, their original stock from here. So we started shipping a lot of our turtles overseas. They have now mastered the forming over there for like the red-eared sliders. So they're now mass producing red-eared sliders themselves, but they originally got turtles from here. So from the US. So because their turtles over there have been nearly depleted, a lot of the populations in the wild, there is a big push to get turtles from here. The southeastern United States has one of the highest turtle diversities in the country. So that's where they're being funneled. And when you have states that have prohibited harvest partially or completely, and we're the only state that has not, naturally a lot of turtles are gonna come from here. And because of the high price tag associated with these animals, there is even more incentive for people to either legally or illegally, take our turtles from the wild and ship them overseas.
So from a
but it could be
turtle-
for food or pet,
Okay.
it's for
But
both.
from a turtle farmer standpoint, maybe you need to answer this. Is it more for the people are using them for pets, or is it more for consumption, or a little bit of both? From a farmer's standpoint.
Excuse me, Mr. Boudreaux. Mr. Boudreaux. Mr. Boudreaux, can I have you come up to the mic for me, please? Thank you.
The question was pet or food
Right. For
Um,
our farmers, for the Louisiana farm.
for the Louisiana farmers is that the turtles which we raise here in Louisiana are for the pet industry worldwide. A lot of them go to the Far East, a lot of them go to Europe, some even go to South America. The Chinese, just like the gentleman said, is eating all of their turtles up in China and also Southeast Asia. So what they came here 20, 25 years ago, learned how to raise turtles. And the majority of what they're raising there now is the red ear slider. And the red ear slider is for consumption. That's what they're doing. They're eating them. They have one single farm on Hainan Island, incorporates 175 acres. They employ 40 full-time employees, and they don't raise thousands of turtles. They raise thousands of tons of turtles each year for the food market there in China. There is a pet market there in China, and excuse my language, but China is just like a pissing match. Whoever's got the biggest, the prettiest, the most expensive, then that's what everybody else wants. One instance there is that the albino red-ear turtle, which was found by a few farmers, maybe one or two a year, was sold actually to some of the Chinese people. They are now raising albino turtles. And the albino turtles was normally $100 turtle. It got to be $1,000 turtle 4 years ago. Now it's a $20 turtle because China's got it to raise those turtles. So that's what happened here. To kill to sustain our industry, what Louisiana Wildlife Fisheries needs to do is educate the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to only allow baby turtles to be shipped internationally. Only allow baby turtles. That at least would give us 10 to 12 to 15 years of longevity, because what happened was that they were actually importing the adult turtles, and within a year to two, again, they had mastered the turtle farming aspect, and then they were raising their own turtles. They didn't need to come to Louisiana and buy baby turtles. They were now in competition with the U.S. market, with the Louisiana market. Now they're selling baby turtles worldwide. And what happens there is some of our markets, especially in Europe, they are now selling the musk turtles, which is the most interesting turtle now to our worldwide clients, through the back doors to our clients in Europe at 40 to 50 to 60% decrease in price. So you see the Louisiana turtle industry slowly declining year after year.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
A question. I know there was some comments and our emails blew up last night and the last couple of days over a late notice. Last Friday or whatever time. I know this went all the way back to 5 months ago. Is there a particular reason or what took place, or it seemed like the turtle farms are kind of okay with the recommendation from the department, still got some things to work out, but it seemed like maybe the pet side is a little concerned with the short notice. What was the purpose of that? I know it wasn't a purpose, but could that have been prevented to give a little bit more time for individuals to maybe be here today and a little bit more input?
That's a good question. I think Cole, yeah.
Certainly Commissioner Wall handled that. So the Louisiana Open Meetings Laws requires 24 hours notice for any meeting and to set the agenda. Your bylaws actually require 72 hours notice. We make it just as a matter of practice to try to get notice out to the public and information to you guys a week in advance. And in this instance, it did go out on Friday. So, you know, from both the bylaws perspective and the open meetings perspective, there was ample notification and opportunity. Certainly, I guess your question of can we informally let people know who we are aware are interested in this, that know that it's coming up, you know, certainly that can happen, but certainly met all the legal requirements for notification for these meetings and stuck with our common practice.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, we also will have an open public comment period until the public hearing, and we will be having a public hearing on October 22nd. So there will be additional opportunity to provide input.
Yeah, I guess I'll piggyback on that as well. It's a good, I know Ms. Lejeune brought this up at the very beginning of her initial presentation, kind of the process, but just a reminder, what's before y'all now that you're voting on is amendments to the original notice of intent that was promulgated, that was published in January. And so however that comes out, if y'all vote to amend that, that will trigger another public comment period and a mandatory hearing that will occur on October 22nd. So we will gather those comments, provide y'all with a summary of that, and then you'll get to take another crack if you so desire in November to look at the rule as a whole. I do believe in this instance, like in most, you have also authorized the secretary to move it forward in the absence of any further action. So procedurally, that's kind of where we're at. What you're really voting on, and I've heard a lot of comments about the rule itself. What you're really voting on are the amendments that have been highlighted in Ms. Lejeune's presentation, as well as the kind of more enhanced fiscal and economic impact statement done by Dr. Jack Isaacs, which will concurrently be published should y'all take action on this. So that's where we're at procedurally.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Walker.
I have a question about the snake enclosure requirements, and forgive me because I'm only a few months in, so I may have missed this a few months ago. Was there any discussion about grandfathering in the size requirements for snakes that were already being held, and then any new or additional snakes having to conform to the new requirements, or is that just too hard to regulate?
Yeah, so when we talked about it initially, we realized that it was an issue for people, and for most public comment that we received, it was a huge concern. And so when we actually had those regulations, the enclosure size requirements for the turtles, the tortoises, the lizards, the snakes were already in our regulations in Title 76. They were just in a different section. So we just took those regulations. We didn't develop those or anything. We took those, which actually came from a couple of publications, literature. And so those, we moved them to the reptile and amphibian section in an effort to have everything kind of concise in one section. Then when we received the public comment and realized it was a really, really big issue for folks, and how much they would have to expend, and folks that would have to potentially give up their businesses to be able to get all these new enclosure cage sizes for the really large snakes, especially. Those can be upwards of $1,000 or more a piece. So when we started revisiting that, we really wanted to work with the folks, work with stakeholders to see how can we kind of compromise on that. It would be difficult to, I feel, to have different size enclosures, grandfather folks in and keep track of all that. Whereas we just said, let's just work together with the industry and make these enclosure size requirements be something that they already have, and they won't have to get anything new. Or maybe there might be a proportion of people that might have to get a cage, get upgrade, but it might not be the thousands or so dollars when you're having multiple hundreds of animals that you're having to get cages for. So.
Thank you.
Any additional commissioner comments or questions? All right, we have an item that requires action for us to consider, which is the amendments to the rule. I think as Mr. Garrett indicated, that there will be a public comment period following the promulgation. Should the commission elect to move forward with this, we do have the option to have those comments brought back to us, or alternatively allow the secretary to take action after receiving those comments. So if someone is inclined to make a motion, hearing those provisions to that, if you want to make one, I would be happy to entertain it with a second.
I'll make the motion that we go ahead with the Potpourri as a department has presented it, and we'll go through the whole process of it.
All right, so we got a motion by Commissioner Blanchard to move forward with the notice of intent for rule changes to the reptile and amphibian regulations. And just for clarity, do you want the public comments to be brought back to us in
Yes.
November?
Yes.
So comments following the period will come back to the commission and we'll take final action at that time. That's Mr. Blanchard's motion. Is there a second on that motion? Got a second from Commissioner Segura. All right, everybody understand the motion, and we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, well, please record opposition of by Commissioner Brister. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Lejeune. And thank you, Dr. Isaacs. All right. Next, we have item number 10, receive and consider a declaration of emergency to set the 2024-2025 this item.
Good morning, Commission, Mr. Commissioner. I'm Robert Caballero. I'm the biologist for the department with the oyster program. I'm presenting the 2024 oyster stock assessment and our season recommendations. Sharing with some background information, here's the historical commercial oyster landings in Louisiana for both private and public sea ground, private leases and public sea grounds and SACs. And 2020, you could see that we had about 550,000 SACs landed, lowest ever recorded due to the 2019 flooding events and the 2020 pandemic shutdowns. Then from there, 2021, we had an 88% increase to about 1 million SACs. 2022, about an 8% increase from the previous year. And then in 2023, this past year, we had a decrease of about 16%. When we split the commercial oyster landings between private leases in light gray and the public sea grounds in black, you notice there's been a big shift in landings between the public sea grounds over time and the private leases. In 2021, we had about 99.6% of overall landings coming from private leases. In 2022, we had about 3.3% of the landings coming from the public grounds. And then last year, we had an uptick because we had a good year, and public grounds provided 7.3% of the commercial landings. Here we see a map of Louisiana coast. The white outlines here are the public oyster seed areas that are managed by the department. The yellow dots are our sampling stations where biologists collect data for the stock assessment. We had about 100 sites visited, 516 replicates collected via scuba diver on our reefs. You could see we go from what goes to next. In this graph, we can see the results of the oyster stock assessment collected by LWF for the whole coast. The black bars represent seed oysters. The black line is the 20-year long-term average for the seed oysters, while the white bar represents SAC or market size oysters, and the blue line is our 20-year long-term average for market size. As you can see, the public sea grounds have been in a decline over the years due to environmental and man-made disasters. We can see an uptake in our oysters in 2023. This is mainly driven by several cult plantings, and we've been having slight drought years that have kind of increased growth and recruitment. We still see an increase across the state in 2024. You see we're up 8% from last year on seed oysters, 31% on SAC or market size oysters, and overall it's 20.9% and for the 20-year long-term average and 21% from last year. From the whole state's 2024 stock assessment results, we'll break it down by our coastal study areas. You'll see we'll go from east to west. We have CSA 1, that's east of the river, east of the Mississippi River. It's divided in north and south. The north is our Biloxi Marsh area and Blake Bourne. South is our Black Bay area. CSA 3 is our Barataria Bay system. 5 East is our Lake Shan and Michon, part of Terrebonne, and CSA 5 West is our other side of Terrebonne, which is Sister Lake. CSA 6 is our Vermilion Atchafalaya Basin. And then CSA 7 is focused on Lake Calcasieu and Sabine Lake. Finally, here's a table with the results of the total seed and market size oysters per area in barrels. If you see green, it's an increase from last year, and red is our decrease from last year's stock assessment. As you can see, east of the river, north of MRGO, we had an increase in seed and an increase in market. It's 213% increase in overall resource from the previous year. South of the Mr. Go, that's our Lake Black Bay area. You see, we didn't find any seed resource this time, and we had a decrease in market and an 89% decrease overall from last year's stock. Little Lake, Barataria, Hackberry, all of our resource and is in a Hackberry Bay. We had an increase in both seed and market. It's up 269% from last year for total resource. Lake Shan and Felicity, we didn't find any resource for the last several years, including this year. Sister Lake has had a 87% decrease overall from last year. Lake Michon and Bay Junip has seen 116% increase from last year, with a bump in seed and market oysters. Lake Calcasieu continues to see increases across the board for both sides of the lake. We had 109% increase, 42% increase on the West Cove, and statewide, we're over 1 million barrels of resource and up 21% increase from the 2023 assessment. This is a graph that shows the resource concentrated in the state public areas. You see Calcasieu still contains the bulk of our sack and seed oysters, with the Mississippi Sound now catching up with the recent culch plantings in Drum Bay. And Lake Sabine wasn't assessed this year. It's on a every other year sampling cycle. Here, I'll report on each basin, starting with Lake Bourne, Mississippi Sound. We're still recovering after the 2019 flooding events. We had a 213% increase from last year. Most of the seed resource is in the 3 Mile Bay complexes. The oyster seed and sack resource exceeded its 20-year long-term average. We recommended for this area to open for both market and limiting bedding harvest. Just there's more resource than last year, and the harvest levels were reasonable last year. Here's the Black Bay, Bay Gardine, Lake Fortuna area. 2024 stock assessment shows 100% decrease in seed oysters and 89% decrease in market from previous year. Available resource is concentrated in Lake Fortuna area. With little to no recruitment and no seed resource found, I'm recommending for no seasoning in this area this year. This is the Little Lake, Hackberry, Barataria Bay areas. The area had a 269% increase from last year. All this oyster resource was found in upper Hackberry Bay reefs. It's above its 20-year long-term average. We'd be recommending this area to open for market and limiting bedding harvest. This area, Bay Junip and Lake Michon, they were closed last year. They're on an alternating opening with Sister Lake. Bay Junip and Lake Michon has seen an increase in oyster resource. With Lake Michon, it's up 166%. I'll be recommending for openings in both of these areas this season. Let's see, you can see Michon here. Sister Lake has seen a 87% decrease from last stock assessment. This year will be a closure for Sister Lake, and we recommend for it to remain closed to recover from last year's harvest. Again, it's on a alternating opening with Bay Junip and Lake Michon. Here, I was here last month to talk about Vermilion Atchafalaya Bay. We had emergency opening in August, although we had no participation by the industry in this area. They didn't want to bed the area, they just wanted to market, so we didn't have anybody participating for that August opening. Vermilion still has overall increase in both seed and sack size oysters, exceeding its 20-year long-term average. With the lower Atchafalaya river levels, we're still seeing a nice spat set and growth in seed and sack size oysters. As you can see, the historical densities in this area sees good oyster abundance during drought cycles. Finally, we have Calcasieu Lake, has consistently shown improvements over time. East Cove has shown 109% increase in overall resource from last year. West Cove has shown a 42% increase in resource from last year. Both the East and West Cove were open for harvest all year last year, maintaining sustainable harvest levels. We do manage the East and West side separately. Calcasieu Lake has exceeded its 20-year long-term average the past 2 seasons. I'll be continuing with last year's recommendations with the staggered opening between the East and West sides, talking to harvesters in this area. With the extra allocation, we're able to bump up the possession limits for one of the sides so that they can make enough money for make their living. So talking to the harvesters in this area, we're recommending for upping the limits on one of the sides. Another issue affecting the recommendations is the upcoming LDH lines. Oyster harvest areas, both public and private, are under Louisiana Department of Health testing. If water testing by LDH indicates presence of contaminants above acceptable limits, those areas will be closed to bivalve harvest. Looking at Sister Lake, the LDH line is expecting the northern half of Sister Lake to close coming in November and cutting off Lake Nisha and parts of Bay Junip. That's why this closure will push my recommendation to an October opening so that the industry can get in there before the closure. I met with the Oyster Task Force last Wednesday. The department has amended the season opening dates as requested for the 24-25 season by the Oyster Task Force. They requested to move up the bedding season to November and some of the sacking seasons to November 1st. However, the Oyster Task Force also requested to up the amount of non-living material allowed in seed bedding loads from 15 to 30%. The 15% figure was pushed by a previous commissioner and has been a part of the commission action since 2018 season. Reef material is an important resource for the state's public oyster seed grounds, and this department recommends continuing with the current 15% allowance. The department is recommending a 3-day bedding season, Bay Junip, Lake Michon, Little Lake, Hackberry, and east of the Mississippi River and LDH areas 1 and 2. Following the no more than 15% non-living material allowed in bedding loads, opening on September 23rd. Then an October 21st opening for market resource in Bay Junip and Lake Michon for a 5-day season with 30 sacks a day, a 1-day possession limit to allow the harvest before those health closures I talked about in November. We're also recommending opening of LDH harvest areas 1 through 4, which are the areas east of Mississippi River and north of the Mr. Go. It'll be opening on November 1st at the request of the OTF with a 30 sack per vessel and a 2-day possession. The Vermilion Atchafalaya Bay will be opening for the entirety that it can be allowed. We'd like the industry to get in there to whenever there's an LDH allowed opening, and we'll be trying to push the season into May. So that way, when LDH opens these areas, they'll be able to get in there without having to rely on permits or anything to access this resource. West Cove and Calcasieu Lake opening October 15th with a 15 daily sack limit per vessel. Then on January 1st, we'll recommend to open the east side with a daily limit of 10 sacks per vessel per day. Total harvest in the lake not to exceed 15 sacks for the whole lake. This is some additional season regulations in the DE. There's some regulations that we've been using for the past seasons. The restriction for the 15% non-living material, reef material and bedding loads, and allowing enforcement and biologists to inspect bedding loads. And this is to restrict the removal of excess reef material from the public grounds. Restriction of sacks or containers during bedding to prevent direct sale and market of oysters during the bedding season. Restriction of the market harvest oysters and bedding during the same day. Reminder of harvesters of LDH permitting requirements for LDH closed areas. The use of properly permitted oyster cargo vessels during the season. These vessels cannot harvest oysters while operating on the cargo vessel permit, but some of the remote areas, they like to rely on these. The requirement of unshackling the oyster dredges after harvesting hours. Again, we continuing with the using the electronic daily reporting. We're moving to full electronic reporting this season. I have the video that I'm going to show y'all. I didn't know if y'all got to see it after last meeting when I sent y'all the link, but here I have a better detail in the video that'll go through it.
E-reporting is a mobile application that allows those individuals harvesting oysters from the public oyster areas and seed grounds to report what was harvested for a given date. The use of this application allows users to report harvest information as required by oyster season regulations set by the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Reporting is required by the licensed oyster harvester on each vessel fishing on Louisiana's public oyster areas. In this video, we will give a brief overview of the e-reporting app function. First, download the e-reporting app by Shellcatch from either the Google Play Store or Apple App Store, depending on the operating system of your smartphone. Select the country, USA. This application is used for different fisheries around the world. You will only have to do this on the initial setup of your account. Register with email or phone number and select a password. If you have trouble with your email, try using your phone number to register. The user will need to enter their first name, last name, oyster harvester license number, license type, email and phone number, and select a password. Once your account is created, log back into the e-reporting application. The next step will be to add your vessel information. This will be the vessel with the harvesting permit for the public oyster grounds or public oyster areas in the state. Please enter the vessel name, vessel license number, Coast Guard registration number, and state registration number. Continue to add all vessels that you intend to harvest on this oyster season. Please repeat the steps to add each vessel. The next step will be to add trip information on the day you intend to seedbed or market harvest. Start by selecting the shell button at the bottom of the screen. Select the harvest start date. Select the vessel you are using to harvest. Next, select the type of harvesting activity, whether you intend to seedbed for the day or sacking. Next, select the LDH harvest area for the reefs you intend to fish for the day. There will be an option to add another LDH harvest area if you intend to get your daily limit from multiple reefs in different LDH areas. Select the quantity of your harvest in this LDH harvest area. The units will default depending on the harvest activity you selected prior. Please report your bedding activity in barrels and your sacking activity in standard full sacks. Before finishing your trip summary, you will be asked if you intend to harvest another reef in a different LDH harvest area to make your daily limit. If you did harvest from multiple reefs and different LDH harvest areas, please repeat the previous steps and list the quantity harvested and LDH area it was harvested from for this date. After you have entered all harvest for the day and submit, the application will give you a timestamp for your entry. You are required to enter the harvest information by 9 p.m. of the date of harvest by LWF season regulations. Your phone does not need to be in service range to enter this information, and the timestamp will be given regardless of service status. This timestamp will serve as proof of reporting for LWF regulations. When your phone does reach service range, it will submit the data to LWF. Please note that the boats that now appear on the home screen are simply icons used to mark that a harvesting trip was reported for that specific area and not a GPS tracker. This app does not track vessels. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions about e-reporting, please visit the LDWF website at this address.
When the, once commission sets the oyster season, we'll send out a postcard that has a QRL for the oyster fishermen. And this information was provided last year. It'll be provided again this year. And they can scan the QRL code. It'll bring them right to this video and all the steps and how to download it from your Apple or Android phone. Here, this is a map with all the dates. That's the end of my presentation.
Robert, I got a question. The seed beds look like everything is up this year. Is it up because of lack of fresh water, more salt water in the oyster beds, or do you know?
Yes, Commissioner. Last year, we were in a drought year. We saw a high recruitment. Saltwater does wonders for oysters. And they grow. We had a high recruitment year last year, and that's carried over into seed, and some of it's already transitioned into market this year. And again, we're seeing another drought year, and we're still seeing good recruitment in certain areas. So we're looking to have a good seed coming into next year as well.
And the oyster task force is in favor of the opening right here?
Yes, the Oyster Task Force has requested some date changes. We made all the date changes they requested. The only measure that was not changed was the 15 to 30% that they had recommended. We'd like to stick to the 15% of non-living reef material threshold and bedding limits.
If no one else
Yeah,
has any other
I'd-
questions, I'll make the motion. We'll go ahead and accept the declaration of
Sister Lake
opening.
and east of the Mississippi River, south of MRGO, you got two of them that are down pretty significant in comparison to the other areas. Is there anything you can share with us as to more about elaborating on?
Last year, Sister Lake had a great year. It was open for harvest. Because it was a great year, we had an extended harvest of 34 days. It's longest it's seen in 5-6 years. The potential is that depending on salinity levels, those oysters take a little longer to grow. Depending if the salinity gets higher in there, they might grow a little quicker. There has been brought up public comment that it could be poaching in the area, but I don't have any data for that. So
Poachers generally don't report their catches, so I get it.
So I'll end from that data is that there has been an 87% decrease from last year's stock assessment, but we did have a generous harvest quota last year, and generally we keep it closed so that this year it'll grow and then it should come back by next year. South of Black Bay area, there's a general freshwater problem in that area, but we just haven't been seeing much recruitment and no oysters coming back.
Is that freshwater problem in the area from that diversion on the east side of the river right there? That's now wide, flowing heavy.
I don't have the data to conclude all the different freshwater sources that are coming into that area, but generally we have seen some decent months with good salinities, but we still haven't seen the oyster recruitment come back.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Anybody else with questions? You said, Mr. Commissioner Blanchard?
Yeah, I'll make the motion. We go ahead with the recommendation from the department.
I'll second it.
Got a motion by Commissioner Blanchard and a second by Commissioner Walker. Any further questions or comments? If none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, last on the agenda, consideration, receive and consider a notice to intent to modify the recreational and commercial shark harvest regulations. Jason Adrians.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. And I appreciate the segue this morning on Black Bear about giving back some resources. That's what this presentation's about. We have a notice of intent before you to adjust some recreational and commercial shark limits. So why are we doing this? We have some current limits on sharks that I'll mention those species later, but we have some current limits that were established when shark populations were declining pretty quickly. There wasn't good data or stock assessments available or metrics to measure those populations. The fishery had just started with a bang when it did. Encounters and depredation are becoming more numerous. And these proposed changes are for species that have populations that are rebuilding or can be considered pretty sustainable. And some of the changes in here, in particular, the prohibited species we're adding, provides some consistency with federal regulations. So on the recreational side, what we propose is removing the recreational bag limit for bull and blacktip sharks. Currently, there's a bag limit of 1 per person or 1 per vessel. We also are recommending removing the 54-inch minimum size limit for bull and blacktip sharks and just having no minimum size on those. And that kind of mirrors what happens in the commercial fishery already. There's a commercial fishery for these sharks. They are not bound by a size limit currently. And then we'd like to add short fin mako sharks to the prohibited list of sharks. You can see there in July of 2022, NOAA established a retention limit of 0 for short fin mako sharks. That was a result of changes that occurred at ICAT, which is an international convention, and NOAA is bound by some of those international conventions and treaties, and so they made these changes, and so we're just looking to make those changes as well. For commercial trip limits, we'd like to make some adjustments to the commercial trip limit for large coastal sharks. It's currently the default limit is set at 45 sharks per trip. NOAA has been opening that fishery at 55 sharks for the last few years. That requires us to take some secretarial action. That authority exists in 76. This would just eliminate that need annually to adjust that. Depending on if the commission moves this forward, we may still need to do that this year, given the timing of this proposed notice of intent. And we expect in the future, some of these limits may increase. So there's a provision there to provide the secretary with some authority to adjust those limits as needed, as necessary. There's a new assessment on blacktip sharks, but NOAA is a little slow in the process of adjusting the quotas. They have to go through some rulemaking for accountability measures and setting some allowable biological catch for those sharks. That's probably going to take another year or 2 before that's in place. And also adding short fin mako sharks to the prohibited list would make it prohibited for commercial harvest as well. The notice of intent, if the commission moves it forward, it should publish in the September State Register. The comment period would end November 7th. There is secretarial authority in the notice of intent, like with a lot of our notices of intent, for it to be moved through final. And it could publish as early as January 20th next year. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Commissioner, questions, comments?
Jason, on the no limit rule that we have for black tip, do we think we're gonna over catch the black tip, which I don't think, but I'm just asking.
I don't anticipate a dramatic increase. Currently, recreationally, we land about 165 of those on average per year. We'll certainly watch the landings. I don't anticipate that to go dramatically high.
They're more of a nuisance than anything else right now. They have so many of them, and it just needs to. We need to thin them out a little bit.
And this would allow some opportunity for folks to keep those sharks. And if you treat that meat nicely, you get them right away, you bleed those sharks, it can actually taste pretty good.
You gotta have the right equipment to get them in the boat.
Any other Commissioner comments? We do have one public comment card. We can receive public comment, come back to commissioners. I have a comment card from Mr. David Cresson from CCA. Oh, all right. Anybody else? Comment? Observation? All right. Is there a motion on this? So just so we're clear on this one, this will go all the way through final. We won't get back.
That authority exists unless the commission wishes to see it again.
Just making sure everybody saw that. All right, so I got a motion by Commissioner Brister, a second by Commissioner Wall. Yeah.
I don't need to say it either.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Adrians. Got one final public comment card. I think we're on number 12. I have a comment from Mr. Ty Hibbs. Can always count on you to close down the meeting, sir.
I'm sure y'all missed me. It's been a while. Had another second baby boy, number 2. So I've been focused on that lately, but good to see y'all. Ty Hibbs, Southeast Louisiana. Just want to start by saying congrats on some of the fantastic achievements as of late, especially with Black Bear. It's a pretty monumental thing that y'all and everybody here was a part of, especially our biologists. You know, without them, we probably wouldn't be able to make any of these decisions. Just want to come up here and formally invite y'all to a science symposium I've been working with the American Saltwater Guides Association at the New Orleans Yacht Club, September 27th. That's Friday, September 27th. And we've put together an event to showcase to the public and all of the other attendees of the scientific advancements that have been made here in Louisiana with the help of ASGA and as well as local members, as well as showcasing some of the great things that have taken place here at the department lately with a presentation from the Fisheries Department. This organization came to me a couple of years ago and said, how can I help? Never asked for $1, never asked for a single thing in return. I can't thank them enough for their efforts for the past few years, as well as helping me with some of the projects I've been wanting to take on here in Louisiana, especially with this event here, which is going to be a purely scientific event such as this. I'd love to see y'all, the commission, Secretary Sheehan, and all our new administration, and anyone else from the department that is interested in learning what is going on with ASGA here in Louisiana, as research from all angles will only help to achieve access to the best data possible and keep us on top of fishery science here in the country as we are currently. You'll be seeing an email from me soon if you haven't already with the invite information, and feel free to contact me if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hibbs. With that, I believe we are at adjournment. Is there a motion for the adjournment? Commissioner Blanchard, second by Commissioner Seguera. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.